What's up, everybody? My name is Annie Linville. I'm a pelvic floor and sports physical therapist here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and today we're going to be going over how to fix your hip hinge and why you may not be feeling it in the right places. So the example that we're going to give is using a staggered deadlift, so a B stance setup or a kickstand, and we're going to go over some of the 4 common mistakes that I see when people are not able to feel their glutes working with this. So let's break it down and take a look. First most common mistake that I see in this is that people tend to clench their butt under instead of letting their glutes and the back side of their pelvic floor expand. So what this may look like is when they go down into their hinge, what I'll find is that their butt and their tailbone will almost be a little bit tucked under. You can kind of tell through this because the lumbar spine will tend to be just slightly more curved, and you can see that the butt will almost flatten a little bit. Versus when we actually let this back side expand, you can see that the butt is nice and round, it's lengthened versus being tucked under. And so when people go down into this clenched position, they may still feel the glute working, but they're gonna probably feel their low back working a little bit more, and they're not gonna feel like the glute is able to reach its max capacity for work. So if you notice that your butt tucks under in this movement, the fix is going to be that you really focus on, when you keep your foot onto the floor, you're going to think about lengthening through this area first. You're going to think about this hinge, this glute lengthening is what's allowing your body to hinge forward. And you want to stop at the point that you feel the glutes start to stretch. Now, once I reach this point, I kind of have people check, like, do you feel like you could expand a little bit more? Do you feel like your butt muscles are clenched under? And they will often be able to feel that. And what I'll have them do is really think about expanding and spreading through the sit bones and allowing that rounded glute to occur. A lot of people will misconstrue this as me thinking that they want to just arch like this through their low back, and that's not exactly what we're looking for. But if you're tucked under and you hinge, when I have you almost think about spreading through those sit bones, you're actually kind of untucking to more of a neutral position. So we're not really in this excessive arch here that you may feel that you're in if you're an over clincher. So just really focus on allowing those glutes to expand and lengthen, sit bone to spread, and that's gonna allow you to really feel the maximal load applied to the glutes as they're in that expanded position. The second mistake that I'll see is that people just pass right over the glutes and dump straight into the hamstrings. Now, with a hip hinge or an RDL, it's not wrong to feel the hamstrings at all. That's a part of the movement, but we don't want it to be just the hamstrings lengthening that performs the movement. We want it to be the glutes and the hamstrings together along that posterior chain. So what I'll see is that when people go into that staggered lift, they really shift their weight back almost where their toes could lift, and they just go to the point where they feel the hamstrings lengthen. They just put a big stretch on them, and then they come back up. So stretching and leaning their weight way too far back and then coming back up. Or they'll just go so far down forward that they just pass over the glute in the first place. So the things that we'll do to fix that are to make sure that when you hinge down, you're keeping your weight over your midfoot, like right where your laces are, or if you have your shoes off, again, right over that midfoot. So you don't need to shift your weight all the way back into your heels. You want to think about sending it so that we're lengthening, and then as I hinge down, my weight is really centered over my midfoot and not back into the heels like this. So that when I'm in that midfoot, I can really feel the glute lengthening and I can feel the hamstrings. I tell people to think about lengthening, find your glute first. Okay, here, yep, there's my glute, I feel it lengthen. You can go a little bit further as you get more depth, and then I feel my hamstring, and then I feel both at the same time engaged when I'm ready to push up. So you want to think about keeping that weight stacked over the midfoot. As you go down, you're thinking lowering through the glutes first, check. Then you can lower through the hamstrings to make sure that you're getting both muscle groups. The third most common mistake that I'll see is overuse of the low back. So you want to think about your hinge as the role of the spine is to hold the line. That doesn't mean that everyone's neutral is the exact same position, but as we're generally speaking, as we go into the hinge, we want to try to keep that spine in a generally neutral position so that we get the maximum work and loading through the glutes and the hamstrings, which we're trying to target. So what I'll see for this movement is as people lower down, they either will go into a lot of extension and overuse that low back, or as they come up from that lift, they'll pull that weight up with the back as they drive the weight up instead of pushing the foot into the floor. So that's how we're gonna be thinking about this, is we're gonna push instead of pull. So as we go down, we're lengthening, again, finding that glute lengthening as we already talked about in the other tips. And then from this position, we wanna think about driving our foot and our leg into the floor to press up instead of allowing our back to pull us up. So think push, not pull. Inhale, lower down, lengthen through the glute and the hamstrings. Exhale, drive that foot into the floor to come back up to stand. Inhale, lengthen, expand through the glutes and the hamstrings. Push and drive that foot into the floor, and that helps take a lot of the pressure and work off of the low back. And reason number 4, I kicked my shoes off for this one so that you can see what I'm talking about here. We want to think about keeping our weight through the full foot. So a lot of times when I see people come in and we take a look at their hip hinge, we'll notice that weight will either shift a lot of the times to the outside of the foot and the big toe will come up. I'll see people as they shift their weight totally back like this. I'll see their toes want to come up off of the floor and the weight go all the way into the heels. And we want to really think about keeping our weight through our full foot, okay? So as you have that staggered hinge, if you're looking at it from the front, we want to think about big toe staying anchored. We want to think about weight along the inside of the foot, especially if you're somebody that's prone to the outside. So as you shift your weight towards the full foot or the inside of the foot, you'll still have your weight through the outside of the foot too. You're sharing it. So you're almost thinking about big toe, little toe, heel, that tripod stance as your anchor point. And when you go down into your lunge, you feel that full foot making contact with the floor. The weight is in line with that midfoot as we've already discussed. And we drive that foot into the floor to come up. And same thing as we lower back down. So that foot is staying in full contact. If you're looking at it from the side, we're making sure that as we hinge, weight is over that midfoot. Big toe is staying anchored to the ground. We're not shifting back and being, if I can see you wiggle your toes, I don't love that. I want you to keep those toes anchored, drive through the foot to come up to stand. So there you have it. There's 4 common mistakes and ways to fix the hip hinge. If you're struggling with it, this is one of my favorite movement patterns to help master and fix low back pain, hip pain, and pelvic floor issues. So apply these to your movements, practice them, comment below if you have any questions, and I hope this was helpful for you.